Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 11th common session of Synoikis Digital Classics Summer Semester 2019. Today, our guests are from the University of Zagreb, and we have a session entitled From Annotated Text to Vocabulary Exercises. And our guests today are Neven Jovanovič and Peter Soldo from the University of Zagreb. And Neven already joined us a few weeks ago with another session about digital scholarly editions. And today is again with us to present the work that they have been doing at the University of Zagreb with other faculty members and with students. And you have the session outline in GitHub, of course, with the description of the tools that we are going to use today, seminar readings, and also the slides. And so we'll see in the session outline, you can see the description. We are starting with annotated texts in Greek, prepared at the University of Zagreb, and then we will see how we can use them for vocabulary exercises. So Neven and Peter, welcome back to Synoikis for this session.
Yeah, hi, hello, Monica. It's nice to be connected. Okay.
Okay, so, excellent.
As usual, if something happens, please let us know. And thank you for giving us a chance to present what we did. Somehow what we did had several phases, so I will first briefly explain that this project in a way grew out from a realization, a conclusion that we have reached when teaching Greek here at the University of Zagreb. Again and again, we have seen that the freshman students, when they come to us, they are confused on their first encounters with actual Greek texts. It's all very nice and well while they study grammar and while they translate sentences as examples, but the real Greek, it always comes as something of a shock. And to make this shock a little bit easier, or perhaps to make it harder, depending on how you see it, we decided to introduce real Greek texts very early and in large quantities, but in small doses, so to say. We created a reader in which there are 60 short original texts from Herodotus to Plotinus, to be studied at the rate of 4 texts a week during the first semester of Greek. So the texts are commented, the comments are cued to our standard Greek grammar, so the students are not on their own completely. But, and here we come to our project, to study the texts means to us more than just to read, understand, and translate. We wanted our students also to master the vocabulary of these texts, forming in a way a basis for their further study. And we wanted the students to engage strongly as possible with Greek, so that the language becomes part of their daily routine, at least for those who are ready to make the effort. To produce this vocabulary component of our reader, we asked the senior students of Greek. One of them is today with me here in Zagreb. So we asked the senior students for help. And now Peter will explain how they helped.
So in January of this year, we were asked to annotate morphologically a series of texts, which were chosen by our professor. And we did so in the Arethusa environment. We had to determine the correct lemma for each word and the correct part of speech for each word. After we were done with this, we sent the text to get the feedback, and the texts were corrected, sent back to us. This happened multiple times, depending on whether it was necessary or not. So in this, we generally grammatically analyzed these texts online in the Arethusa.
Yeah, thank you. Don't don't tell everything yet. So we'll be speaking about this in more detail. But the main thing was that the senior students were in a position to help the younger, even though indirectly for the moment. And now, because Synoikis is here not only for classicists, it might be useful to say in advance that in our project, some things are hard or at least new for philologists, and some other things may be new for computer scientists and for programmers. People who are familiar with programming will see in what we are about to present how human language is described and annotated, and how language is learned in a way that is planned and structured. So it doesn't simply happen, you start speaking and then you make yourself understood. You know that we cannot do this for Greek, for ancient Greek. We have to give it a little bit more structure. On the other hand, people who are familiar with ancient Greek, they will see how and why some things like version control is used, how a computer language, which is called XML and is used for markup, how it is structured to receive linguistic knowledge, and how it is manipulated to transport and to reorder this knowledge. And of course, we are not computer scientists, so we won't be saying much that might be new to computer science students. But still, I want to say that at least version control, the system underneath GitHub and used by software developers, is a tool and a concept that should be known to philologists, and we will soon show why. So now we go to our slides, and we will share screen now, just a moment. Okay, so I hope you see the slides now.
Yes, it's perfect, yes.
Thank you. And here is the plan of our presentation. So we will first be telling you exactly what we did, then how we did it, with what materials and with which methods, because we used some tools, some generic and some special. We will give them a separate section, and then we will explain the results. This explaining will be quite brief, as you will see, because we will simply run some scripts, but it will all be explained well beforehand. Then we are ready to discuss what we did. So our task was to prepare exercises which will help our beginning students to master the vocabulary from the text that they will be reading or that they are reading. For this task, we wanted to use the selection of Greek texts that were already annotated linguistically, as Petar has already told us, but we use this set of annotated texts to produce vocabulary exercises, but in a semi-automatical way. So you will see why this semi-automatical way is important for us. First, we will explain what exactly we mean when we say linguistic annotation. So, Petar, this is your part, please.
All right. So when we talk about linguistic annotation, we talk about a grammatically analyzed text. When we want to analyze the text in terms of grammar, there are two things we have to do. First, we want to find the lemma of a word. Now, this means to lemmatize words. When we say lemma, we mean it's kind of a standard form of a word. It's the form in which we can find a certain word in a dictionary, for example. So when we go through a text, whether we do it through some kind of a program or some kind of an application, or if we do it with a pen and paper, we first have to determine the form in which we can find this word in a dictionary. This way we can determine the meaning, some grammatical nuances, and stuff we want to find out about the word. Secondly, we must determine what we call part of speech of certain words, meaning that we grammatically describe them. For example, if we have I don't know, the Greek verb apon, its part of speech would be that it's a verb, it is in the aorist tense, it is active, it is a first person verb, and so on. So this means to grammatically describe a certain word.
And this is important. Why is it important for us, for learning the language?
Of course, we cannot understand properly a language unless we can in some sense translate it to our own language, or learn how a certain word functions inside the text. So we cannot go to a syntactical analysis or a meaning analysis of a sentence unless we first morphologically determine all parts of the sentence.
I agree. So this is how it actually looks like in XML. As you see, Peter has mentioned that we have a form. This would be the third section that you see here. For example, in the first row, there is the form pies. Then we have lemma, this dictionary form, which happens to be the same because it is nominative here. And then there is a description made very brief and in code, but this code is not very complicated to decipher. So it says everything that we can say about a word from the grammatical, morphological point of view. Now, once we have all this information, we want to do something with it. And the basic manipulations that we wanted to do is first, we want to reorder the texts. We want to see them in a different order, not in a way that it comes at us when we read the text. We also want to form groups, different groups based on some shared features of words or forms in the text. And we are also interested in frequencies. How often do we encounter a word in a text? What is rare? What is very frequent? Which forms are frequent? Which lemmata are frequent? This is not always the same, of course. And which parts of speech, for example, is there more nouns or more verbs or more conjunctions and so on. And finally, what we also want to do with using XML is to get just some forms, just some lemmata, just some parts of speech. This is what is called selecting in computer language. Now, when we were preparing these exercises, we found ourselves again and again doing some things which were the same, so repeating some tasks. Some of the tasks are listed here, so we always started from we want to retrieve all forms in a text, but the punctuation was not important for us. We also wanted to, when we have a form, we wanted to see its lemma. When we have a form, we wanted to see its part of speech. So if you think about this information as fields in a table, we wanted to go from one field from the first field to the second, from the second to the third, and so on. Also, we wanted to go in an opposite direction. When we had a lemma, we wanted to see does it occur somewhere else, either in our texts or in another database. We will see that we used another database soon. Also, we wanted to retrieve all forms of a lemma from a text, and we wanted to retrieve a meaning, in our case, a Croatian meaning, a Croatian description from a database where such descriptions are stored. Finally, we are using a program to help us learn vocabulary, and to import exercises into this program, we had to reformat the results. So these were our common tasks in manipulating XML. So this is the second group. Linguistic annotation was the first group of methods. XML manipulation is the second. And now the third group is are the methods for vocabulary learning. Peter.
So this is something that most people, a lot of people actually use, but maybe are not aware of the concept behind it. Something called, we came across something called spaced repetition. It's a method of memorizing information. Now, it happens that we tend to remember things more efficiently if we study them in several occasions rather than in several occasions spread through time, instead of having just one intense study session that lasts for, I don't know, a few hours.
As students tend to do.
So cramming stuff before the exam is not the most efficient way to learn things. So the fact is that the more often we recall a certain fact, the greater are the chances we will memorize it correctly. So this is one of the principles of our method. Now, if we also look up and kind of try to practice things that are harder for us to memorize, if we do it with greater frequency, if we do it more often than the things that are easier for us to memorize, the results will be even better in this sense, that we will more often have to recall things that are harder for us to memorize. And another, so the Anki, the Anki software we used, it is based on the concept of flashcards, meaning that in a physical sense, it would be cards that you have one thing written on one side and the other thing written on the other side. So you can see how you can use this for learning. It's also a really, really common learning and teaching method. What we also thought about here is not only this spaced repetition concept, but we also thought about when you make your own cards, it is the act of making cards is a process of learning on its own, meaning that if you have to choose the material that will be on the cards, you will automatically remember it much better. And on the other side, you can choose what you want to have on the cards.
So you have to make a judgment. Is this important? Do I need to learn this? And so on.
Yes. And of course, if you have a set of cards tailored for your needs, it will be much more efficient than, for example, if you pick someone else's preset deck of cards or a preset set of exercises that are made for general public. This way, if you use it for if you tailor it to your needs, you will of course be much more efficient. Yes.
Okay, so this was the vocabulary learning, and the last method that we had to use, we came up. So we use the method to share our research because it is important for our project to be accessible to others, especially, of course, to other members of the Synoikisis course. Now, to achieve this, we choose a very usual approach in software developing, but again, something that philologists have to be told about. We published our materials and scripts as a version-controlled repository. Now, what is version control? So, from a programmer's perspective, a version control system keeps detailed records of who changed what in code and when did the change take place. This enables us to see who is responsible for what, and if necessary, we can go back and undo a change which did not work as expected. So such a system helps to maintain very complex code and helps teams to work together on this complex code. But it is also interesting from a philologist's perspective, because I think that version control is what the philologists actually do when we establish a critical apparatus. When we think about history of a text, then we try to record all changes that happened to a text between the time of its writing and our own time. Of course, philologists are usually distributed widely across time and space, so we use things that a previous generation has prepared, or we read books by people we have never met and never will. But philologists don't have an explicit culture of working together. They have more of a culture, I am more clever than you are, and I can show you that you did a stupid mistake, and shame on you, and so on. But I think this can be changed in the digital age. And this is also why we choose to make our code accessible. In that way, and that will be the final exercise of everybody who is watching this session, any member of the Synoikisis course who wishes to do so can replicate, can repeat what we did. You can even, of course, if you want, you can extend what we did. You can build something else on top of it. And we gave you an explicit permission to do so by making our work licensed under a Creative Commons license. So I think in this way, the digital age and the internet enable us to share not only the results of our work, our end product, so to say, only our findings about a set of texts, but also the materials and the processes that we use to achieve these results. So you can repeat what we did, either to test us, to ask, does it really work, or to extend our work to do something else on top of it. In the so-called hard sciences, this is called replicability, and it exists, of course, in the humanities, but it is often left implicit. It is not said explicitly. It does not have to be like that. So these were our 4 methods. We used linguistic annotation, we manipulated XML, we used an approach for vocabulary learning that is called spaced repetition, and we wanted to share our research. Now here are the tools that enabled us to do so. First, a tool for linguistic annotation. Peter.
So we used the Arethusa interface, which is a part of the Perseid's platform. Now, many of you are probably familiar with the Arethusa, so we will not talk about it too much. There are some great Sunaikisis sessions from last semester that you can watch, and there are also some great online materials elsewhere on YouTube and on the Perseid's platform you can choose. We have to mention, we have to give special mention to the fact that Arethusa is primarily used for syntactical annotation and for syntactical analysis, for creating sentence trees and tree banking. And the morphological analysis is just a prerequisite for this. So,
we can say that it is designed more for how words function together, and we are thinking about words on their own.
Right.
For the beginning, at least. For the beginning.
But we use this tool that enables us to create a document about what sort of a word each word is, and what is its lemma, what is it part of speech. We use this tool from this Arethusa application for our own benefit.
Yeah, so we used only 50%
yes,
of Arethusa.
Yeah,
or perhaps even less. Okay. To manipulate XML, we used an XML database application, which is called BaseX. It is developed by a team based in Constance in Germany. And just for a moment, let me show you. Let me show you the homepage. Okay. Now this is the homepage of BaseX, and I found personally that BaseX is a good and easy way to learn how to create XML databases and how to query and manipulate them. Of course, it takes, we have to learn a special programming language, which is called the XQuery. But BaseX also makes it very easy to run scripts, the complete sets of XQuery commands that somebody else has written. So we have used this to the end. We have designed our project as a set of XML files from which you can create databases, and then you can query them and format the results simply by running scripts which we have prepared. And we have put this in a separate directory of our code repository. Now, if you do this, you will end up with a set of text files, very simple files, which are ready to be imported into Anki. Now, again, this is an application used for learning vocabulary, and Peter will explain how Anki works and what it does.
Right. So we analyzed our texts, we imported them into a program which analyzes the XML files, and now the end product we import into Anki. Now, Anki is a flashcard software, basically. So it creates flashcards that you can design for your own purposes for learning on your own. It uses the aforementioned spaced repetition principle method, meaning that once you have the card, before you check when you check the result, you can select how well, let's say, you solved the flashcard. How well did you remember the thing that was on the other side of the flashcard? And depending on how well you solve the flashcard, it will space the next repetition of that flashcard in the program.
And if I may interrupt you, what is interesting in Anki to me is that you have to mark yourself.
Yes,
so you decide yourself whether it was hard for you, it was easy, it was piece of cake or what. And now again, usually there are some methods where a computer makes this decision for you. But here, initiative is on the learner, and this is what I think is important.
Yes, you have to evaluate your own knowledge in this sense. So and this is important because if you choose that, it enables you to repeat the words you are less familiar with more often, and the words that are really easy for you, it will come in, I don't know, in 4 days, not in a matter of minutes. And that's the methodological part where we chose Anki because of these qualities. And we also chose it because, well, it's free. It's also multi-platform, meaning that you can be used on any kind of OS you have. And also, as you can see, there is a version called Anki Droid, meaning that it can be used on your Android smartphones and other tablets or whatever uses Android. So it can be carried around with you. You can do it while you're commuting or
while you are waiting in line for lunch or
something like that. And another, I think, important feature that is also made us choose Anki in front of other similar tools is that it was easy to import results, massive results we get from querying our XML files. Yes, so I think that's enough about Anki.
Yeah, and you will, of course, the most information about Anki you may find by reading the manual, and there is the link to this Anki manual on our in our repository. The next tool that was important is the so-called Dickinson College Core Vocabulary List. Now, there are such lists for Greek and for Latin. And because for some exercises, we wanted to concentrate not on any Greek words that our students encounter, but we wanted to steer them towards those words which will be especially useful for them because they will encounter them later very often. These words are frequent in all Greek texts. So these are the words that you really have to learn first when you are reading Greek. So this resource that we have used was first published in 2012. And at the moment, these lists are important because they are in a digital format. They are freely accessible. We can do with them whatever we want because they are published under a Creative Commons license. And of course, there are some serious theoretical issues about what is frequent and in which texts. But people who created these lists, they are well aware of these problems, and still they managed to bring us 500 most common words in classical Greek. There is also a list of 1,000 such words, frequent words in classical Latin. And we have to admit that for some time now we have a Croatian translation of these core lists, but we have not yet added them to the translations that are already available on the Dickinson College website. So this summer we have a chance to do this. Anyway, we have reformatted these lists as XML again, and these are the versions that we have used to find occurrences of common words in our text, as you will see. Finally, to distribute our materials and scripts to perform this version control that I have spoken about, we have used GitHub, which is familiar to most programmers, and a final release of our code and our text is also available through a service called Zenodo. Now, Zenodo is also a repository, an open access repository of data sets, of research software, of scholarly reports. But when I say scholarly, it does not mean that you have to have a PhD to use it, of course. This means basically that Zenodo exists because it is financed by a European science organization, because this organization has recognized importance of open data for advancing science. This means that Zenodo will neither vanish overnight nor will it become closed overnight. And also it is nice that Zenodo assigns a citable identifier to our work, so it is easy to cite it, and if you do cite it, it will certainly make us happy. Now, let's see how we put this all together. We come to something that is between a demonstration and presentation of our results. So first, I will show you how the base X interface looks like. We have already started it. It is in one of our workspaces, and I will first demonstrate how we create a database using one of our scripts. What you see here is the interface of BaseX. It is divided in several panes. For us, the upper pane is interesting at the moment. There is a script that is called create DB Greek, and we will use this to create our main database. First, I will show you how this is a list of databases that I have here, and I already have a database that is called Syn Greek, like Syn for Synoikisis, but I will destroy it. So I will simply drop the database because I want to create the database again. How do I do this? I simply press on the Run button and run this script. The script already takes everything that it needs from the same repository. Now we have to see whether it works. So we want to run another script, let's say this one, which will take from this Syn Greek database only some parts of speech, so only some word forms. And again, I simply click on the green button and I see the results in the lower left-hand pane. Now here you will see that it is possible simply to save the results. If I choose this save as sign, I give some name to this set, and then I'm ready to edit the results or to import them directly into Anki. And this is more or less everything that you have to do when you have BaseX and R repository installed. So you simply open a script to start, for example, from create this database for Greek and Latin core, for our core words, and then you run the script. That's all. Of course, if you want to extend this in any way, then you change scripts using your knowledge of xQuery. Or you can study what we did and criticize us. But how do exactly our exercises look like? So to show you this, we go back to our slides, and Petar will explain which exercises we have created with these scripts. Petar, please.
Right. So obviously, to create the script, we first have to know what we want it to do, right? So we came up with 3 scenarios for learning, for three types of exercises. First of all, we wanted our exercise to practice. We wanted to practice when we have a certain word form from the text. We want the person exercising to find the lemma for the given word. So the standard vocabulary which we talked about. So for example, if we give them the word praxis, on the other side of the flashcard, the person will find praxis, and then he would choose if he knew the answer.
Yeah, so it's like a typical classroom situation when you see a word in a sentence and the professor asks you, what's the dictionary form of this word?
And of course, this is important to be able to search, for example, a word in a dictionary. And we find that it has a special significance for ancient Greek, because as some of you might know and be very familiar with it, ancient Greek words, especially verbs, have a lot of irregular forms or suppletive forms, or forms with different upload grades and stuff like that. So sometimes knowing that a certain form comes from a very different lemma is extremely important for our student. Second exercise was finding, for a word of a form, you have to give a grammatical description. So for example, we have the word praxis, and you have to say that it's the accusative of a noun which is in feminine gender, in plural in number, so it can be either nominative, accusative, or vocative. So this is of course important, as we told you earlier, because you have to be able to know the grammatical description of a word to be able to analyze the text. And by practicing this, it gets much faster, it gets optimized, and you do not have to, it's when you master this, when you are able to go through a text without actually thinking deeply about each word, then you can finally read the text and you can think about other things that are maybe also really important, such as, I don't know, style or the meaning of the text much more easily. And this is a big part of learning a language. And our last exercise that we thought of was a simple lemma to translation. This is probably the most classical one. It's a classic. So you have a word in Greek, and you have to give it in this example. You have to give it a Croatian translation. So we have the word potamos, and in Croatian it's rijeka, or in English it would be a river. And this is of course important for you to understand the words, to know what the words mean, in order to be able to gather the meaning of a sentence. So these were the 3 exercises we wanted to create for the students.
Mm-hmm. And what we did next, for each scenario, we wrote a script. Actually, we didn't write just one, because I also wanted to act pedagogically. So there are several versions. Each is more complicated. And then finally, we come to the complete version. Usually they are called 2 Anki. They have 2 Anki in the end, meaning that they prepare something that is a text that is ready to be imported into our vocabulary learning tool. Now, because I have already shown you how the script works, and it's not very complicated when you have them, I will skip this part, but I want to show you how Anki works, at least on my desktop. Now, it is perhaps not the most beautiful interface, as you can see. It actually looks very Spartan. But what is important, first I will show you how it works. So if you use it on a computer, which is actually Peter has told us not the best. The best thing is that you carry the words everywhere with you so that you use your spare time to study this instead of checking your status on Facebook, of course. But what is important that this is how a text, this is how a task looks like. So the question is Haima, and you have to know how to say this, I think, in Croatian. Then you choose show answer, and you see that Haima is the equivalent of the Croatian word krv. And here is what we told you about. You have to mark yourself. You say whether you knew this word, whether it was good or it was easy. If you didn't know this, then you will see this in under 1 minute. If it was okay because we are encountering this word for the first time, then you will see this in less than 10 minutes. And if it was very easy for you, then you will only see this in 4 days. For example, if you knew this beforehand or whatever. But this is how it works. This is how you use Anki to learn words. There are all sorts of statistics and so on, but I won't go into this now. But if you want to add some cards, if you want to add a file that you have produced, in our case with base X, then you select File, and then you go to Import, and of course the usual dialog opens where you can simply select a file, and if it is formatted right in the right way, then it will say, okay, I see 3 fields. Then the field 1 will be mapped as front of the card. The field 2 will be mapped as back, that is the answer. And I can also have the 3rd field, which will be a tag. A tag is useful for us, for example, then in that way we can have all the words from the section 1, from the lesson 1, but then later on we can add words from the lesson 2, and then we can combine them and so on. So, and this is basically all. If you want to do this, if you want to import cards into Anki, if you have prepared them in such a way as you see here, and it is really all that it takes. So here you see the first field, here is the second, the next field, and here is the tag. So this is ready to be imported into Anki. I think it is time for discussion now. So we will think, first we will tell you what we think is important about 2 things. First, what did we learn and how we can use this. Peter, please.
Well, speaking, of course, from a student's perspective, well, the most obvious probably would be if you have to run a certain grammatical analysis of a certain number of texts, it sharpens your language analysis skills, which is always important. In other aspects, it kind of forms a picture of what are the digital tools at our disposal, what can we actually do with digital tools in the sense of creating exercises for ourselves or analyzing a text. And not only can we see what the digital tools are, we can also learn something about them. So during this process, of course, I learned something about XML or XQuery and etc., basics and other programs. And also we learned something about a pedagogical set of skills. As I showed you, the memorizing method, the spaced repetition method was also very useful. And you can, of course, implement this later, not only for your own use, for to study for certain exams, but you can also use it if you are going to teach somewhere or have a class in any sense. This is very useful to know as a method for someone. This is what I think are direct things that you can learn by going through this process. Other uses of this system we have established are following. I thought of perhaps if we use this sort of exercises and this sort of data querying, we can create, for example, syntactic exercises. So you can have an at position, and then ask what kind of a case should go after it. You can have fill in the blank exercises where you have a sentence, a lemma, and you have to put the lemma in the correct form in order to solve the exercises, etc. And of course, for this, you would have to use some other data, some syntactical data, but this could be further steps. Now, in sense of using this not only for Greek and Latin, I think that having an automated vocabulary learning system, something that would generate vocabulary exercises for a person, could be extremely useful. A script that would run through a text and pick out vocabulary for someone and then create flashcards would be really useful. For example, you start practicing law in Germany, and now you want to know about the legislational vocabulary of Germany and about the law vocabulary of Germany, of the German language, and you can create vocabulary exercises based on certain texts. Or you read a book and you want in a foreign language and you want to be able to remember words from this book. It would be really useful if you could run a script that would extrapolate words from here and create vocabulary exercises for you.
Okay, thank you. I think for this discussion part, we can also go back to where we are. Just a moment, so we can stop sharing the screen. We can. Okay, sorry. And there is another thing that is important for me here, and I wanted to add this to Peter's conclusions. In this project, we wanted to demonstrate two aspects of digital philology. First, as Peter has said, how we use existing resources. Some resources are generic, so they can be used on any data, on any file, and so on, but some are developed specially for ancient Greek. And we used both. We used generic and special tools. But we use this to build something that we need, even though I wouldn't say that we build a system. This is more like a manufacture. It's all somehow patched together. It's not a real shiny, beautiful system. But we also wanted to show how digital methods make it easy for research to become replicable. We can publish this in a way that will enable anybody to repeat exactly what we did. What you need to do is go to the GitHub repository, go to release, download our release, then simply unzip it and install base X and Anki, and you are ready to start using this in the same way that we are using this. And I know that this is possible because I made Peter do this, and he managed to do this on his own. And then I think that this repeating of other people's work is of importance both for scholars and in a pedagogical way. Pedagogically, you see not only the results, because often in school we only see the results and then we feel, oh, I have simply to learn this and this is all. But now you also see how the results are produced, how we come to them, and how the experiment was conceived. Now, for scholars, this showing you not only the results, but also how we did this makes it easier to judge us. So you can say, what did they do? They made a mistake here, they forgot this, and this can be much better in that way, and so on. But this is also welcome, because then you can improve what we did, or you can extend what we did. And this is possible in the world of digital philology, in our opinion. Yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, so Neven, Peter, thank you very much. It was great, and I'm very happy to hear these things. And I think that, I think again we have all the questions with new technologies in the end. So a critical edition is, I think, a collaborative environment, a collaborative interface. In a printed edition and a manuscript, we have a collaborative environment, and also, in many cases, beautiful interfaces, and now we have them in a digital world. And again, so the last thing you mentioned, which is very important, replicability. So developing something that other people, other scholars, students can use. Again, something that we had in the past, even if, as you said at the beginning, humanists like to work alone. In any case, the effort of philology was to produce tools, conventions that can be reused in some way. So the method is always the same. Of course, now things are a bit different because we are learning, we classicists, we philologists are learning to work with other people, as you said at the beginning. Yes, so this is true. So I don't know if we have questions in our Google Hangout. Okay, so we have, Neven, I hope you can read the chat in the Google Hangout.
Well, I'm blushing because I'm reading Anis's message on chat, but Anis is asking us about flashcards with words in context on it. So this is something that Petar has also thought about. So what would be the implications? So how I think the question Anis is asking is, how do we do this? And we see that the Portuguese Greek core vocabulary is ready, and that is beautiful. So I think the next question will be, this would be a question that perhaps Greg Crane would pose. What happens when people start learning the same Greek but with a different other language? So, yes. And when they are doing this together in a way that we are doing this in Synoikis at the moment. But let's leave this. So I can tell you, when we want to show words in context in flashcards, this is of course the next step. We have done something very simple, first because it was easier for us to do so, and of course because we wanted to well, perhaps not inspire, but to stimulate people to think about other formats. But everything that works is of course welcome, that works in a way that it makes it easier for us to master Greek, and it works in a way that we are able to write a script that will produce this. Of course, for this we should make a tree bank. We have started, you will remember, from a very simply annotated Greek text. We didn't connect words in any way. We only said this is a noun, its lemma is pies, and that was about it. But we could add another layer, yes, and ask perhaps not to build the complete tree, but to say this is a preposition, it is connected to these words.
Right, because you have the head, the head attribute in the XML, and you can really, I mean, it also encodes, except the XML also encodes when you do the syntactical analysis. Yeah. It encodes. In our case, this was not required for us in the initial process. And when we were asked in January to do this, the syntactical annotation was not required. So we didn't even have this data. But yes, I think that the simple ones, because in the dependency trees, you can easily see which word is dependent upon each other, and maybe trying to think of exercises that could be adapted to the tree form of analyzing sentences.
I mean, if you can also think about very simple exercises. There's enarche.
Yes.
And now, what does enarche mean?
Yes,
so that's the question, and this is also because we don't learn in a foreign language. We don't learn isolated words. We learn them in phrases. Chunks.
Yes.
So if we show these chunks, we are getting a bit closer to the natural way of learning a language. And of course, Anis knows this very well.
Well, yes, and then of course I think another way for showing for students showing words in context, a concordance, which is an old tool again, but now we can easily produce concordances. There are tools online, also students can use them. So this is a possibility to show and then to select words and see how they are used in different contexts. And then of course with the tree banking we can also really visualize different trees where we have sentences where the same word. Of course, these are examples. I'm telling this because in YouTube, people who follow us on YouTube, they can't read questions in the chat. So Anise from Brazil, she's asking about using flashcards with words in context, and Neven and Peter replied. And then another thing that Anise is mentioning is that given that in Araraquara they have been working on Portuguese, Greek dictionary. They have digitized this dictionary, and they also they have contributed to the Dickinson College core vocabulary. So I think so they ingested this. So again, this is interesting because I don't know if at this point, so they have translations also. So if I understand, or at least forms from vocabulary. So this is the other interesting thing that we mentioned.
Okay. So you have the same word list, which is at the moment translated into, for example, Chinese and Romanian and Portuguese and so on. So it's in itself a very interesting corpus.
Okay, excellent. So at this point, so we can mention the fact that we can also work on translation alignment. So we can align lemmata in inflected forms to the translations. Well, I don't know if we have other questions in our chat. Yes, Gabi?
I had a question about, so you talked about in your flashcard tool, being able to set the frequency at which you would see a word again. So if you learn a word, you can reduce the frequency at which you receive it. I wonder if is there any setting that you set the initial frequency of a word? I'm thinking, for example, you did mention words could be tagged with what section of the text they appeared in, so they could be introduced gradually over the course of the learning cycle. But is there a sense in which words could also be set based on their difficulty? Or how common or rare they are, or something. I mean, that could be a simple frequency thing, or it could be something set manually from a textbook by the instructor. Or what other possibilities are there for that?
Okay, so I think that first there are several parameters that you can adjust in Anki. So the best place to start is the Anki manual. It may be a bit long, but we will find our way. So from reading all the computer manuals, you know the format. On the other hand, what is interesting, I think something different. Anki actually, by using the same algorithm for all the words, it adjusts to you personally, because you decide whether the word was complicated, whether it was hard for you to learn, and not the instructor. So it may happen, and it seems to me quite possible, that what is difficult for the instructor is easy for you, and the other way around. In this way, I think it is perhaps even welcome that Anki does not have this possibility. Of course, you yourself can say, this does not suit my way of learning. I want to see this in shorter periods or in longer periods of time. But this, again, it depends on you, not on somebody else.
And I totally take your point about. Sorry, you go.
No, I just wanted to add that about the first point. It's also an open code, right? And Anki can be accessed if you are. If you can manipulate with this. You can do a lot of things with this because it is open source. And if you have the capability of doing this, you can also, of course, do it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, the only thing I was thinking is if you have words. For example, take an extreme example. A word that turns up in your text, in your corpus, but it's basically a hapax, and it's a very rare word. I mean, it might be a difficult word, it might be a word that's hard for you to learn, but that doesn't mean you should get that word turning up every couple of minutes, because it's so rare, it's actually not that important that you learn that word. So, I wonder, there might be other reasons to set frequency, and it might be complex to do so, but yeah.
Yeah, so this is why we stressed that our method is semi-automatic.
Yeah.
So our lists are meant to be edited by hand. You decide, and of course, I agree with you. It would be very good to know that something turns up in the corpus only once, or that it doesn't turn in the core vocabulary list at all. So then you can make a decision whether I want to learn this word or I don't. But I think, as Peter has said, I think that it is important that it is I who am learning, who am making this decision, because this, in a way, this makes me more engaged with what I'm learning.
But the setting for how frequent a word is currently appears, that setting doesn't appear in your XML. In your input text, rather.
Yeah,
that's the setting in the software.
This is something that you can adjust in Anki. Yeah. So it is not. It just uses the standard Anki algorithm, which is, in my experience, quite. That's fine.
Yeah, it's really well played.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so well, thank you, Neven, for repeating this thing about the semi-automatic component. I think is important. I'm learning that also by experience. This seems obvious, but we have to learn what kind of work we can and we have to do automatically, and what we have and we can do manually. I think we need both in this moment where we are still producing a lot of data, but sometimes it's not easy to really balance the two aspects, I think, and this is, I think, an excellent example for this. I would like you, given that we still have a few minutes, if you can briefly comment the exercise on YouTube, on GitHub at the end of our class outline. We have an exercise. Can you briefly, instructions are clear, so but just for our audience. And Neven, you should unmute.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So the exercise that we have in mind is simply what you would do if you wanted to use our repository. So you go through all the steps which are necessary to, as they say, clone our repository, which actually means that you can either just download the release, or if you know how, you can use Git and GitHub to clone the whole repository. And then you install all the necessary software, which is SpaceX and Anki in our case, and then try to run some of the scripts. First, you have to run 2 scripts to produce the databases, the Syn Greek and the Greek Latin core database. And then you simply go through the description on our repository README page. There are, I think, for each scenario, there is about 3 scripts, and we have tried to say what each script does and how you can find it. Of course, what we thought would be useful is then then after you did this, you write down, or you write a report, what happened, what worked, what didn't work, what was easy, what was hard, and so on.
Okay, thank you very much for this. So I don't know if we have other questions. I'm checking also YouTube. Okay, so I don't think so. Well, okay, so thank you for this wonderful session again. And so at this point, we will meet next week. And next week, we have a session about digital methods and ancient magic. So with Gabriel Bodar from London. And Franziska Netter from Leipzig. Yes, this will be a cool session about, well, magic in the ancient world and how to digitize magic text. So please, yes, join our session. It will be a lot of fun, but of course, it's a serious topic. I'm sure it will be, and we have also data and many interesting things. Okay, for today, so thank you again to our colleagues and friends from Zagreb, and okay, you have everything on GitHub, and so see you next week, and good afternoon, good night for people in our time zone, and good afternoon for other people in other time zones. So see you next week.
Okay.
And bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Thanks a lot, Neven and Petar.
Thank you.